Primary beneficiary. The line is blank. 4 inches of white space on a form that arrived with the electric bill and a catalog for outdoor furniture he'll never order. A man sits at his dining table, same chair he always uses, holding a pen over a piece of paper that just asked him a question the entire financial system assumes he answered years ago. Sets the pen down. Not because he's deciding between names, not because the choice is difficult, because there is no choice. The space where a name should be contains nothing. Not slowly arriving nothing, not painful nothing, just nothing. Clean architectural absence. The form comes from his brokerage firm. System migration. They need updated records. Account number, current balance, beneficiary designation. The first 2 are printed. The third requires him. And him is where the form stalls. There's an assumption engineered into this document. By the time a man has accumulated assets worth designating, the assumption goes, there is someone. A wife. An ex-wife. A partner. The form doesn't ask, do you have a primary beneficiary? It asks who. One is a question, the other is a presupposition. And for millions of men in this country, the presupposition is structurally wrong. He folds the form, puts it back in the envelope, sets it on the counter near the coffee maker, where things go when they need attention but not urgency. It sits there the next morning, and the next. This is not avoidance. Avoidance implies discomfort. This is a man encountering a field that his life never generated the data to fill. The infrastructure for the answer doesn't exist. It's like being asked for a fax number in 2024. The question is valid. The technology isn't there. And here's what nobody talks about. That blankness carries no weight in the moment. No crisis. No sadness, necessarily. It's administrative. A form that cannot be completed not because something is broken, but because the field doesn't apply. Except it does apply. The institution says so. The legal system says so. The financial architecture of the country says so. The blankness is not neutral. It's a gap between a man's actual structure and the structure the world assumes he has. He lives in that gap. Has for years. Most of the time it's invisible. Auto deposits continue. Taxes get filed. The machinery of a life does not require a beneficiary to function, but it requires one to complete. The systems around him, legal, financial, medical, social, were designed with a specific architecture in mind. An architecture that includes a second person, a witness, a recipient, someone who exists not just emotionally, but structurally, as a named entity in the paperwork of a life. When that entity doesn't exist, the paperwork still arrives. But the man holding the pen is operating in a structure that was not built for him. He's known this for a long time, not as a grievance. As a fact, the way a left-handed person knows that scissors are designed for someone else, you adapt. You develop workarounds so efficient that nobody notices the mismatch. But the mismatch is there, every time. The form isn't really about money. The money has direction. It's invested, allocated, doing what money does. Form is about something else. Who receives the evidence that this man existed? Not philosophically. Legally, materially. When the account closes, and all accounts close, who opens the next envelope? Who sees his name not as a sender, but as a source?
Ow!
The form is asking that question, and it has no answer. Not because the man failed, because the life he built competently, independently, deliberately, did not produce a recipient. He pours coffee the next morning. Same mug, same time. The envelope is on the counter. He doesn't look at it, doesn't avoid it either. It's just there. It's present, accounted for, and unwitnessed. There is a particular kind of silence in a house occupied by one person who has always been the only person in it. It's not the silence of someone who lost a partner. That silence has texture, memory, a dent in the other side of the mattress. This silence is original. It was never interrupted. It arrived when he moved in, and it stayed. It is not empty. It's full of his routines, his preferences, his systems. The thermostat set exactly where he wants it. The remote on the arm of the chair is the dishes done before bed every night. This silence is functional. It is the sound of a life that works. But functionality and visibility are not the same thing. A machine can run perfectly in a sealed room. It performs its function and produces its output, and the output goes into the system, into the record. into the account balance that triggered the form that's sitting on the counter. The form is still there. There's a broader architecture to examine. Not about the form, about what happens when a life is fully operational and entirely self-contained, and the world keeps sending envelopes that assume otherwise. The form was not the first time, it was just the most recent. There was the HR onboarding at a new job 12 years ago. Emergency contact. He wrote his brother's name. His brother lived in another state, hadn't visited in 3 years. HR representative didn't blink. The form was processed. The name sat in a file and was never used. There was the mortgage application. The loan officer scanned the paperwork and paused at Kobar War. Blank. Just you? The officer asked. Just me? The man said. The officer moved on, but the pause happened. It always happens. There was the surgery consultation 4 years ago. Outpatient. The pre-op nurse asked, "Who's picking you up after?" He said he'd arrange a car. She said, "We need a person, not a service." He called a coworker. The coworker came. It was fine, but it required a negotiation the form didn't anticipate. Each moment is small. Individually, they register as paperwork friction, but they accumulate, not as pain, as pattern. The pattern. Every major system he interacts with assumes the presence of a second person. Every time that assumption surfaces, he adapts. Quietly, efficiently. The adaptation works. A process moves forward, but the adaptation itself is invisible. No one tracks it. No one measures how many times a man reroutes around a structure that wasn't designed for him. No one counts the micro-negotiations, the pause before answering, the name manufactured for a form, the ride arranged through a channel the institution didn't intend. These are not failures. They are structural translations. He is translating his life into a language the systems understand. And the translation is so practiced that no one notices it's happening. He doesn't notice it most of the time either. That's the thing about a well-run adaptation. It becomes automatic. You stop noticing the conversion because the output looks normal. The form gets filled, the ride gets arranged, everything checks out. But the original architecture underneath is different, and every now and then, something surfaces that makes the difference visible. A beneficiary form, a blank line that can't be filled by a workaround. The coffee is finished. The mug goes in the sink. The envelope stays on the counter. System can operate without interruption and still lack direction. What it produces may be stable, well-maintained, and self-sustaining. But stability is not trajectory. And a system without trajectory is not broken. It is simply circulating. A date arrives in October, his birthday. He knows this, the way he knows the oil change interval on his truck scheduled. It's predictable, requiring no preparation from anyone else. He does not dread it. He does not anticipate it. It arrives the way Tuesdays arrive. His phone buzzes a few times throughout the day. A text from his brother. "Happy birthday. Hope you're doing well," he replies. "Thanks. Doing fine." That exchange has looked identical for 9 years. There's a notification from his bank. Not a birthday greeting, a fraud alert on a transaction from the day before. He clears it. An email from a restaurant rewards program. "Happy birthday. Enjoy a free appetizer." He deletes it without opening. LinkedIn. 3 former colleagues, prompted by the platform's automated reminder. He doesn't respond. There's nothing to say to a machine-generated message that requires no reply. By evening, the day has passed like any other. He eats dinner, something reasonable. The television is on for the noise. Washes the plate, wipes the counter. The brokerage envelope is still there, pushed slightly left behind the olive oil. No one called. That fact does not arrive as a blow. It arrives as confirmation. Not of abandonment, of architecture. His life does not contain a structure that generates phone calls on birthdays. There's no spouse to plan something, no children to check in, no close friend whose role includes that ritual. The absence of a call is not the failure of a relationship. It's the accurate output of a system that doesn't contain that function. There is a difference between loneliness and structural solitude. Loneliness is a feeling. It comes and goes, has triggers, holidays, illness. A particular hour of the evening can be managed, distracted from, or sat with. It is emotional weather. Structural solitude is not a feeling. It is a condition. It is the arrangement of a life in which no recurring external presence is woven into the operating pattern. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't depend on mood. It is the architecture of days, weeks, and years. An architecture that functions without a second permanent participant. The world is obsessed with loneliness. Studies, campaigns, Surgeon General reports, and they may be right. The focus on the feeling misses the structure underneath. It treats the symptom and ignores the engineering. The engineering is this. A man has built a life that works. It meets its own needs. It sustains itself. It does not require external input to continue operating. Engineering is both the achievement and the exposure. The achievement because it works, demonstrably. The bills are paid, the house is maintained, the career advanced. The retirement account hit its benchmark. By any operational metric, this is a successful life. The exposure because no one is watching, not surveillance watching, witness watching. There is no one whose life is affected by whether he succeeds or fails. No one whose Tuesday changes based on his Tuesday. There's no one who would notice in real time if the pattern shifted, if the coffee wasn't made, if the dishes stayed in the sink, if the mail went unchecked for a week. Eventually, someone would notice. A missed payment would trigger a call. An unanswered work email would prompt a follow-up. The systems would flag the anomaly. But the systems are not people. And the gap between the anomaly and the flag, how long would that be? He doesn't think about this often. When he does, he thinks practically. He has a will. Insurance is current. If something happened, the machinery would engage, just slowly and impersonally, without anyone in the waiting room. This is not self-pity. You'd reject that framing on contact. This is observation. He is a man who sees things clearly. That's one of the traits that made him good at his work. Assessing a situation without distortion. Looking at a system and seeing what it is, not what he wants it to be. What he sees, when he looks at his own system, is a closed loop. A closed loop feeds its own inputs. Output becomes input becomes output. No external source. No external drain. In engineering, closed-loop systems are valued for stability. They resist disturbance. They maintain steady state. But they have a characteristic that engineers don't always advertise. They cannot generate information about themselves. No external reference point. The system measures its own output against its own input, but it cannot compare itself to anything outside itself. It doesn't know if it's drifting because drift requires a fixed point. It doesn't know if its calibration is off, because calibration requires an external standard. In a life, the external reference points are other people. Specifically, people close enough to see the pattern from inside, not coworkers who see a function, not acquaintances who see a presentation, people who see the unedited version. The version at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday evening when there's nothing to perform. There were relationships. Some lasted a year. One lasted almost 4. They ended for reasons that seemed sufficient at the time, and that, in retrospect, still seem sufficient. Nobody was the villain. Structures simply didn't merge. That phrasing is more accurate than it sounds. Relationships are structural integrations. Two lives begin to share systems. Financial, spatial, scheduling, decision-making. You start splitting the check, then sharing a lease, then combining insurance. Each step is a structural integration point, where two separate architectures overlap. For him, the overlaps never held, not because of conflict, because of fit. His system was already running. Optimized for one. Every integration attempt introduced friction, not emotional friction, operational friction. Another person's preferences disrupting a workflow that already worked. Another schedule intersecting with one that didn't need intersection. He adapted. He made room, but the room felt temporary, like a guest bedroom that's furnished but not lived in. The structure allowed for a visitor, did not restructure for a resident. And each time the visitor left, the system closed back around itself. Smoothly, the thermostat returned. The remote returned. The silence resumed. He's in his mid-50s now. Exact number doesn't matter because the pattern stopped changing years ago. The architecture solidified somewhere in his mid-40s. When the last relationship ended, and he recognized, not with sadness but with clarity, that he was no longer building toward partnership, he was maintaining a solo system, and the system was good. That recognition is important, not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. It arrived quietly, over months, as assessment rather than decision. He didn't choose to be single forever. He recognized that the life he'd built was a single occupancy structure, and that rebuilding it for dual occupancy would require a demolition he wasn't willing to perform. This is not resignation. Resignation implies defeat. This is the same clear-eyed evaluation he would bring to any system. What does this structure support? What would modification require? What is the cost-benefit? The cost-benefit didn't favor modification. The system continued. Stable, functional, closed. There's one thing from the 4-year relationship he still carries. Not emotionally, architecturally. She used to leave notes, not love notes. Mundane ones, posted on the bathroom mirror, out of half and half. A scrap of paper on the kitchen counter, furnace filter -20 by 25. Her handwriting was small and slightly left-leaning. She wrote in blue ink, always, even though the pen cup had 6 black ones and 1 blue. He doesn't think about her often, but he thinks about the handwriting. Specifically, he thinks about what it meant that there was handwriting in his house that was not his own. Another person's penmanship on surfaces he owned. Evidence of a second operating system running inside the same space. When she left and the leaving was mutual, quiet, more like a lease ending than a breakup, the notes stopped, obviously, but the surfaces where the notes had been remained. The bathroom mirror, the kitchen counter, the edge of the desk in the office. For a while, those surfaces felt like they were waiting. Not for her. For any handwriting, any evidence that someone else was processing information inside this house, making lists, leaving signals, occupying the margins.
The surfaces stopped waiting eventually. They became what they are now. Clean, bare, functional. His alone. No blue ink. No small left-leaning letters. No furnace filter reminders from someone who noticed things he might not notice. He notices everything now. He has to. There's no one else to catch what he misses. The birthday passes. He goes to bed at his usual time. Sets the alarm he doesn't need because he wakes 2 minutes before it every morning. The house is quiet. The quiet is familiar. He owns that silence the way he owns the furniture. Purchased, maintained, arranged to specification. And like all things owned by a single person, it will need to be disposed of eventually. But not tonight. Tonight, the system sleeps. It will resume in the morning. The coffee will be made. The routine will execute. The mail will come, carrying its quiet assumptions about who lives here and how many. And the man will adapt. Again, smoothly, without detection, because the system works. It just doesn't echo. A system that requires no one will confirm no one. That's not philosophy. That's mechanics. Need and acknowledgement travel the same circuit. Cut the need, and the acknowledgement goes dark. He cut the need years ago. Not surgically, gradually. The way you stop calling someone, not because of a fight, but because the intervals stretched from weeks to months to something without a name. The need for connection didn't die. It was decommissioned, replaced by competencies that performed the same functions without requiring another person. Cooking for one, not a limitation, a skill. He eats well, better than most. He learned to cook in his 30s out of interest, and the interest matured. He can break down a chicken. He makes his own stock. His spice rack is organized in a way a professional kitchen would respect. Home maintenance. He owns tools most men his age have never touched. Not handyman cute, genuinely skilled. He regrouted the bathroom himself, replaced the garbage disposal. When the deck boards warped, he pulled, sanded, sealed, and relaid them over a weekend. Alone. Not because no one offered to help, because no one was positioned to offer. Financial management. He manages the portfolio himself, reads the quarterly reports, understands the tax implications of rebalancing, tracks spending with precision most people outsource. These competencies are not compensations. They are not things he does instead of having a partner. They are parts of his operating structure, skills that serve the system. But competency has a shadow. Every skill he developed is a door he closed to someone else. Every task he handles alone is a task that will never require collaboration. Every problem he solves without consultation is a problem that will never generate a conversation. He doesn't frame it that way. He frames it as efficiency. And he's right. A single operator system with no communication overhead, no negotiation latency, no approval chain. Decisions made and executed in the same motion. In a corporate environment, that's called agility. In a life, it's called something else. But no one says the word because the system doesn't display a malfunction. It displays performance. High performance by every external measure. Net worth above the median for his age group. Health metrics reasonable. Home well maintained. Professional reputation solid. Run his life through any standard assessment tool, and he scores well. The assessment tools don't measure echo. They don't measure whether the success is heard by anyone, whether the achievement registers in a second nervous system, whether the career milestone is stored in a shared memory or only in a database. The tools measure output. They do not measure witness. The man passes every test the world gives him, and the world, satisfied with the numbers, moves on. He fills in what he can. He leaves blank what he can't. The system continues. The doctor's office is cold, the way all doctor's offices are cold. Just enough to remind you, this is not a place designed for comfort. It's designed for procedure. He's here for a routine physical. Annual. He doesn't skip them. He comes every year, same month, same practice. Schedules the appointment himself in January when his calendar is open and the deductible resets. The waiting room has 6 other people, 2 couples, a woman with a child, a man about his age, alone, reading something on his phone. He checks in at the desk, confirms his insurance, sits down with nothing to read. His name is called. He follows the medical assistant down a hallway that smells like adhesive bandages and industrial soap. Weight, blood pressure, temperature. The numbers are fine. They're always fine. The assistant pulls up his chart on a tablet, scrolls through, confirms medications, allergies, prior procedures. Then she asks a question. Is your emergency contact still current? He pauses. 2 seconds, maybe less. But 2 seconds in a medical office, under fluorescent lights, in front of a 24-year-old woman holding a tablet and waiting for a simple answer. 2 seconds is visible. Who do I have listed? He asks. She reads the name. His brother. Same brother who texts on his birthday. Lives 1,100 miles away in a state he visits every other Thanksgiving. "That's fine," he says. She nods, moves on. The doctor will be in shortly. His brother doesn't know his doctor's name, doesn't know which pharmacy he uses, doesn't know where the will is filed or which attorney holds the copy, doesn't know the code to the garage door or the name of the neighbor with the spare key, assuming the neighbor still lives there, which he's not entirely sure about himself. His brother is his emergency contact, the way a fire extinguisher is a fire suppression system. Technically present, meets the minimum requirement, but never designed for the actual scale of what could go wrong. He doesn't think about this in the waiting room. He thinks about it later, at home, standing in the kitchen, opening a beer, looking at the counter where the brokerage envelope has been joined by a dentist reminder and a property tax reassessment. The counter is becoming a small archive of institutional correspondence, all addressed to a single name, all operating on the assumption that the single name is sufficient. The emergency contact question is not about emergencies. It's about infrastructure. Who exists within operational range of this man's life? Not emotional range, operational range? Who can be in his house within an hour? Who knows where things are? Who has the authority, legal, medical, tactical, to act on his behalf when he cannot act for himself? For most people, this is answered by proximity. A spouse is in the house. An adult child is in the same city. A long-term partner has a key. The infrastructure exists because the relationship exists, and the relationship exists because the life was built to include it. His life was not built to include it, not as a rejection. As an outcome, the career moved him 3 times before 40. Each move was lateral or upward. Each time he rebuilt his local network from scratch, gym, barber, a restaurant where the staff recognized him, a hardware store where the guy in plumbing knew what he was talking about. These are not friendships. They are operational nodes, points of contact that make a life run smoothly in a specific geography. Friendships existed too, some from college, some from earlier jobs. They didn't die, they attenuated. The way radio signals attenuate over distance. You get fragments. A text at the holidays, a comment on a photo, a vague plan to visit that never materializes because the logistics require more effort than either party will invest, though neither would say so. He doesn't blame anyone. He understands the mechanics. Friendships between men, particularly men without families, operate on a proximity and purpose model. You're friends because you're near each other and you share a context, work, a neighborhood, a hobby. Remove the proximity or the context, and the friendship enters a maintenance phase that most men are not equipped to sustain. And so the network contracts, not dramatically. The way a lake recedes in a dry season, the shoreline is still there. The shape is the same, but the water level drops inch by inch until one day you notice the dock is standing in mud. He doesn't notice most days. The dock still looks like a dock. It's only when someone asks, "Who should we contact in case of emergency?" that the water level becomes visible. The doctor comes in, examines him, everything routine. blood work in a few days. The doctor asks if he has any concerns. He says no. "You're doing better than most guys I see," the doctor says. He says thanks. The appointment ends. He drives home. The route is automatic. He thinks about a different question, one the doctor didn't ask, but one that exists underneath every medical interaction he's ever had. If something went wrong, not routine, but serious, who would manage the response? Not the medical response. Doctors handle that. He means the life response. Who would call the office to say he's not coming in? Who would contact the mortgage company? Who would know what he'd want? Not in the advance directive sense. He has one of those filed with the attorney, specifying preferences clearly, but in the human sense. What to tell people, how much to share, whether to accept help from the neighbor or maintain the boundary that's kept things simple for 15 years. These decisions require someone who knows the man, not just the paperwork. Someone who understands his preferences because they observed them, because they were present when their preferences were expressed, casually, over time, in the small revelations that happen between people who share a daily life. He doesn't have that person. He has the form. The form is excellent, legally sound, prepared by a competent attorney, reviewed every 3 years. In every technical sense, sufficient. But sufficiency and knowledge are not the same thing. A form can authorize decisions. It cannot understand them. He pulls into the garage, closes the door. The house is exactly as he left it. The thermostat reads 68 because that's what he set it to, and no one has adjusted it because no one else is here to prefer a different number. He changes clothes, makes dinner, eats it standing at the counter, which he does sometimes when the meal is simple and the table feels like too much formality for one. The brokerage envelope is to his right. He picks it up, looks at it, sets it back down. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday, he gets sick. Not seriously, not hospitalized. The flu. The real kind, not the kind people call flu when they mean a cold. Fever, body aches, a fatigue so heavy that getting from the bed to the bathroom feels like a project requiring planning. It hits him on a Monday night, and by Tuesday morning, he is not functional. He texts his office. Not feeling well, working from home. He does not work from home. He sleeps, wakes up, drinks water from a glass he placed on the knitstand before the fever climbed. Sleeps again. On Wednesday, the fever peaks. He is aware, in a detached way, that the kitchen is not clean. Monday's dishes are in the sink. The mail has not been brought in. The trash, which he normally takes out on Tuesday evening, is still under the counter. These are small failures in a system that does not tolerate small failures, because small failures are the only kind a single operator system produces before it produces a large one. No one comes. This is not surprising. No one knows he is sick. He told the office he was working remotely, which means the office assumes he is available. His brother has no reason to call. It's not his birthday. It's not Thanksgiving. The neighbor doesn't check on him because the relationship has never included checking. The operational nodes, the barber, the hardware store guy, the restaurant where they know his order, have no visibility into his house. He could be in bed for a week, and the only external signal would be the mail accumulating in a box by the door. On Thursday, the fever breaks. He showers. He moves slowly through the house, resetting it. Dishes washed. Trash taken out. Mail retrieved. 2 days of it, including a catalog and something from the insurance company. Counter wiped. Floor swept. By Thursday evening, the house looks exactly as it always looks. Every trace of the disruption has been erased. If someone walked in on Friday morning, they would see a clean, well-maintained home occupied by a man who appeared to have had an entirely normal week. They would not see the 36 hours where the system was down. They would not see the glass of water on the knitstand, placed there with the deliberate care of a man who knew that if the fever got bad enough, getting to the kitchen might not be an option. They would not see the calculation he ran, half-conscious, on Wednesday afternoon. If this gets worse, if this turns into something that requires help, who do I call? He didn't call anyone. He didn't need to. The flu was the flu. It ran its course. He recovered. The system rebooted. But the calculation happened. And the calculation revealed something that the daily routine keeps hidden. The distance between his normal operating state and the point at which his infrastructure fails is shorter than it appears. Not because he's fragile, because the infrastructure has no depth. It is wide, covering finances, maintenance, career, health management. But it is exactly one person deep. There is no second layer. No backup operator. No one who would notice on day 1 that the system was compromised. Day 2, maybe. Day 3, possibly. The mail carrier might notice the full box. The office might notice the silence. But day 1? Day 1. The man is alone with a fever and a glass of water, and a quiet house that holds its temperature and asks nothing, because the house is a system too, and systems don't ask about the operator's condition. They just run. He doesn't dwell on this. The flu passes. The routine resumes. The coffee is made on Friday morning at the usual time, and the mug is the usual mug, and the counter is clean, and the brokerage envelope is still there, and everything is exactly as it was. Except that he looked at the system from underneath. For 36 hours, he saw it from the position of someone who couldn't operate it. And from that position, the system looked different. Not broken, not inadequate, just thin. One layer of competence stretched across every function, with nothing beneath it. He files this observation the way he files everything, internally, without discussion. The system resumes. The observation is stored. He goes to the hardware store that weekend for plumber's tape. He doesn't need plumber's tape. He has a roll at home. But the errand gets him out of the house, and the house, after 3 days of containing only his illness, feels like it needs a few hours without him in it. At the store, in the plumbing aisle, there's another man, about his age, maybe a few years older, also alone, also looking at fittings with the quiet competence of someone who knows exactly what he needs and is here to get it and leave. They don't speak. There is no reason to speak. 2 men in a plumbing aisle selecting parts for repairs. They will perform alone in houses they maintain alone. The interaction is zero. The recognition is total. Not spoken recognition. Not a nod or a glance or a moment of eye contact that acknowledges the parallel. Nothing that visible. Just two closed-loop systems occupying the same aisle for 90 seconds. Each one solving its own problem with its own knowledge. Each one carrying its own tools back to its own truck. Each one driving home to a house where the repair will be completed and unwitnessed and sufficient. He buys the tape, drives home, puts it in the drawer with the other roll. The house is clean. The system is running. The flu is a memory that no one shares. A system without redundancy cannot be recognized until it fails, not because the system is invisible, because recognition requires a second observer. Without that observer, the system runs perfectly, indefinitely, and the running is unrecorded. Failure, though, failure sends a signal, a missed payment, an unanswered call, a lawn that grows too long. Failure breaks the pattern, and the broken pattern triggers a response from surrounding systems. Success triggers nothing. The man exists in a condition where his worst outcome is more visible than his best one. The only version of his life the world will reliably detect is the one that stops working. He sleeps. The house holds its temperature. The envelope sits on the counter in the dark, its blank line facing the ceiling, waiting for a name the man has not yet decided to write. Not because writing it is difficult. Because the act of writing it would make visible a fact he has so far managed to keep structural, that he is the only one here, and the system runs anyway. A pipe under the kitchen sink starts leaking on a Thursday, not dramatically. A slow drip he notices because the cabinet floor is damp when he reaches for the trash bags. He pulls everything out, cleaning supplies, fire extinguisher, garbage bags, and examines the joint, P-trap, compression nut loosened over time, or the washer degraded. 20-minute fix if you know what you're doing. He knows what he's doing. He drives to the hardware store, the smaller one closer to downtown, where the plumbing aisle is staffed by a man who actually worked in plumbing for 30 years before retiring into retail. He doesn't need the advice. He goes because the parts are better, and the aisles don't force him past 14 displays of things he doesn't need. New washer, replacement compression nut, a roll of plumber's tape, though he now has 2 at home. The cost of certainty is $1.40. Back home, towel under the sink, bucket positioned, nut loosened, washer replaced, threads wrapped, nut tightened, water running, no drip, done. The repair took less time than the drive. And here is the moment that would be invisible to anyone else, if anyone else were here. He stands at the sink, drying his hands, and there is a brief interval, maybe 3 seconds, where the repair is complete, the problem is solved, and nothing happens. Nothing is supposed to happen. It's a pipe. He fixed it. But in a house with a second person, this moment sounds different. It sounds like, got it fixed. And the other person says, oh good, was it the washer? And he says, yeah, the washer. 7 words, no significance. Just a small exchange that marks the transition from problem to resolution. A verbal bookmark. A signal that says, this happened, and someone else knows it happened. He doesn't have that signal. The pipe is fixed, and the fact of its repair exists only in his awareness. The sink works. A cabinet is dry. The evidence will disappear within an hour as the last moisture evaporates. He is not bothered by this. He did not fix the pipe for recognition. He fixed it because it was leaking. The motivation was operational. He is not the kind of man who needs someone to say, "Good job." He left that need behind a long time ago, or compressed it, or rerouted it into the satisfaction of competence itself, which is a legitimate reward that doesn't require a second party. All of this is true. And also, the kitchen is quieter now than it was before the repair. The drip is gone, and the quiet that follows a completed action observed by no one has a texture. Not the quiet of rest, not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a closed transaction with no receipt. He moves on. There are always things to do. The house generates tasks the way any structure generates tasks. He handles them with a fluency that comes from decades of soul operation. He doesn't consult. He assesses, decides, acts. The cycle time is remarkably short. No communication overhead. In management theory, this is a flat organization. One decision maker, no hierarchy, maximum speed, minimum bureaucracy. But management theory acknowledges a limitation. Speed is high, accuracy is assumed, and assumption is where the risk lives. When one person makes all the decisions, there is no challenge function, no second opinion, no moment where someone says, "Are you sure?" Not because they doubt him, because the question itself introduces a pause, a gap between impulse and execution where reconsideration can occur. He doesn't have that gap. Decisions move from assessment to action without interruption. Most of the time, the decisions are correct. He's experienced. He's careful. He knows what he knows and researches what he doesn't. But experience is not infallibility. And the absence of a challenge function means that when a decision is wrong, the error has no external detection mechanism. It's caught only when consequences arrive. And consequences don't come with warning labels. There was a situation 3 years ago. He made an investment decision, a concentration in a single sector that he was confident about, based on research he trusted. The position was larger than his usual allocation. If someone had been present, a partner, a financially literate friend, even a casual observer who asked the right question, the concentration might have been flagged, not prevented, just flagged. A pause introduced into the process. No one flagged it. The position declined. He absorbed the loss. It was recoverable. The portfolio rebalanced over the following year. He handled it with composure. But he noticed something afterward, not about the money, about the process. The decision had been made in a room, literally and figuratively, where no other perspective existed, not because he was arrogant, because he was alone. And aloneness, no matter how competent, is a single data stream. He built the correction into his own rules. No single position above a certain percentage. The rule works. It's the kind of rule a second person might have suggested. He built the second person into the rule. He is both the decision maker and the check on the decision maker, both the driver and the lane departure warning. This works. The evidence supports him. The system performs. But performing both functions has a cost that doesn't show up on any balance sheet. Every mistake is doubled. The error and the failure to prevent the error belong to the same person. No one to share the blame with. No one to say, "We both missed it." No one to absorb even a fraction of the accountability. This might sound small. It is not small. It is the difference between carrying weight on 2 shoulders and carrying it on 1. The weight is the same. The distribution is not. He carries all of it. Every decision, every outcome, every correction, every recovery. The full weight, undistributed for decades. On a Tuesday evening, he stands in the garage, looking at the water heater. 12 years old. Manufacturer's expected lifespan, 10 to 15, still functioning. No leaks, no temperature inconsistency. But he knows, because he researches these things, that failure in water heaters tends to be sudden rather than gradual. It works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, the result is often flooding. He should replace it preemptively. The cost is manageable. The disruption is minimal. The risk of waiting is asymmetric. He decides to replace it. Then he stands there for a moment, in the garage, in the silence that follows every decision he makes. No one to tell, no one to coordinate with. He'll call the installer tomorrow. Choose the unit tonight after comparing 3 options online. He'll be home for the installation because his schedule is entirely his own. The decision is clean. The execution will be clean. On a Thursday of that same week, he opens his email and finds a message forwarded from someone at his old company. A name he recognizes. Greg Tanaka. Not a friend, a colleague. Same department for about 5 years. They'd eaten lunch in the same group occasionally. Talked shop. Greg was the kind of guy who always had photos of his kids on his desk. 2 boys, close in age. He and Greg didn't stay in touch after the man left the company. There was no reason to. The proximity ended. The context dissolved. The email says Greg died. Cardiac event. Sudden. 61 years old. The email is not addressed to him specifically. It was sent to a distribution list that someone maintained, former team members, people who'd overlapped. The kind of list that exists in someone's contacts from a previous era and gets activated when something like this happens. He is on the list the way a file remains in a cabinet after a reorganization. Not deliberately included, not deliberately excluded, just still there. He reads the email twice, not because he's grieving. He didn't know Greg well enough to grieve in any honest sense. He reads it twice because the email contains details that create a specific picture. Greg was found by his wife. At home, she called 911. The boys flew in that night. The service was Saturday. The office sent flowers. A collection was taken for a charitable donation in Greg's name. The infrastructure of Greg's death was immediate, coordinated, and populated. People were notified. People arrived. People made decisions on Greg's behalf and in Greg's memory. The system around Greg activated within hours, because the system around Greg included people whose operational proximity was measured in rooms, not in states. He closes the email. He doesn't delete it. He doesn't forward it. He sits with it for a moment, the way he sat with the brokerage form, not avoiding, not engaging, just letting the information exist in his awareness. And the calculation begins. He doesn't initiate it. It initiates itself, the way certain computations run automatically when the right data enters the system. If the same thing happened to him, not the cardiac event, but the aftermath, what would the infrastructure look like? His brother would receive a call. From whom? The hospital, if it happened in a medical setting. But if it happened at home, in the kitchen, in the garage, in the bedroom, who would know? When would they know? The mail would accumulate. At some point, the carrier might flag it, or the HOA might notice the loan, or the office, if he still had an office, would note the extended silence. These are institutional detection mechanisms. They operate on delay. Days minimum, possibly weeks. His brother would eventually be reached. His brother would fly in. His brother would stand in a house he's visited twice and attempt to execute a will he's never read, filed with an attorney whose name he would need to find in a system he has no map for. His brother would open drawers and closets and the file cabinet in his second bedroom and try to reconstruct from documents the operational architecture of a life he observed from 1,100 miles away. His brother would do his best. His brother is a decent man. But doing your best with incomplete information in an unfamiliar system is not the same as managing a system you helped build. Greg's wife knew where the insurance documents were. She knew his passwords, or enough of them. She knew his preferences, his physician, his pharmacy, the name on the lawn service contract. She knew these things not because she studied them, but because she lived inside the same system. The knowledge was ambient. It accumulated the way dust accumulates, not through effort, but through presence. He has no ambient knowledge holder. Every piece of operational information about his life exists in one location, his own mind. Some of it is backed up in documents, the will, the directive, the financial records. But the vast majority is not documentable. It is the kind of knowledge that lives in daily practice and dies with the practitioner. Which drawer has the flashlight? Which breaker controls the kitchen? Which neighbor has the spare key, and whether that neighbor still lives there? The alarm code, the garage code, the password pattern he uses, which is consistent enough to be deduced by someone who knows him, but opaque to anyone reconstructing from scratch. The fact that the water heater is being replaced next week. The fact that there's a second roll of plumber's tape in the drawer that didn't need to be bought. Small knowledge. Operational knowledge. The kind that only exists inside a shared life. He doesn't catalog this. He doesn't start a document titled, Things Someone Would Need to Know. That would be an admission of something he's not ready to formalize. Not because it's painful, but because formalizing it would convert a structural condition into a personal one. And he prefers the structural frame. The structural frame is manageable. The personal frame is not his operating language. He goes to bed that night thinking about Greg Tanaka, not about Greg's death, about Greg's infrastructure, about the fact that when Greg's system stopped, there were people within arm's reach who could identify the components and keep the adjacent systems running. Greg's ending was witnessed, managed, and absorbed by a network that existed because Greg's life was built to include it. His ending, whenever it comes, will be processed by institutions, the bank, the attorney, the county. Efficient, impersonal, correct. Every document will be found eventually. Every account will be closed eventually. The house will be sold eventually. But between the event and the eventually, there will be a gap. A gap populated by no one who is present for the daily architecture. No one who can say, he would have wanted it this way. No one who knew without being told. He is the ruler and the thing being measured, and the distance between them is always zero. The water heater installer comes on Monday. The installation takes 3 hours. He stays in the garage the entire time, not supervising, but present, because this is his house and these are his systems, and he is the only person who will verify that the work was done correctly. The installer finishes, tests the unit. Everything works. The installer leaves. The garage is quiet again. New water heater. 12 to 15 more years of reliable operation, by which time he will be older. Significantly older. He turns off the garage light, walks inside. 14 steps down the hallway. The decisions no one hears accumulate most quietly, not because they're painful, because they're constant. A man who makes every decision alone is not making dramatic choices in isolation. He is making Tuesday choices in isolation. Water heater choices, washer replacement choices, dinner choices, what to watch, when to sleep, whether to call someone back or let it go to voicemail. Each choice is trivial. Each choice reinforces the structure that made it alone. Solo decision becomes solo competence, becomes solo expectation, becomes solo architecture, becomes solo decision again. The loop closes. The loop tightens. He doesn't feel the tightening. The increments are too small. Each one is nothing. A decision about a pipe, a decision about a water heater, a birthday without a phone call, an emergency contact that exists in theory, a colleague who died and was surrounded by people who knew where things were. These are not events. They are readings. Data points from the system recording its own pattern without anyone to review the data. The pattern. Competence expands to fill the space that relationship would have occupied, not as a substitute, as a structural inevitability. When a system has only one operator, that operator becomes capable of everything the system requires. And as capability increases, the need for a second operator decreases. And as the need decreases, the likelihood of introducing one decreases with it. This is not a trap. Traps are set by someone. This is a feedback loop. It operates without intent, without malice. Systems optimize for their current configuration. A single operator system optimizes relentlessly and effectively for single operation. The house is dark. The new water heater hums softly in the garage, holding its temperature through the night, steady, unmonitored, doing exactly what it was built to do, for as long as it can. The statement arrives in a white envelope with a blue logo. Quarterly. He recognizes it by shape and weight before opening it. Retirement account summary. He gets the digital version too, but the paper copy still comes because he never opted out. He keeps them in a file cabinet in the second bedroom. The room that was supposed to be an office became an office and has remained an office so long that calling it the second bedroom describes a previous life for a room that has fully moved on. He opens the statement at the dining table, same chair, reads the number at the top. It has crossed a threshold, not a round number exactly, but a number that represents something specific in the planning model he built years ago. A number that means the accumulation phase is, by his own calculations, functionally complete. Combined with Social Security and the other assets, this balance would sustain his current lifestyle through a statistically reasonable lifespan. He ran the projections himself, stress-tested them against inflation scenarios, healthcare cost increases, market drawdowns. The number works. He sets the statement down. This is a milestone. A man has worked for 30+ years, contributed consistently, managed the allocations, weathered the downturns, and arrived at a number that means the work accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish. The system delivered. He sits with the statement, not reading it again. He absorbed the number on the first pass, just sitting. The way a man sits after finishing a long project, not celebrating, processing the transition from building to having built. In the version of this story the financial planning industry tells, this is where the man and his wife look at the statement together. She says, "We did it." He says, "We did." They talk about what comes next, the travel, the freedom. The brochure version. He looks at the statement. The statement does not look back. This is what completion feels like in a closed system. It feels like accuracy. The projection was correct. The inputs matched the model. The output arrived on schedule. The engineering was sound. And the soundness is confirmed by the engineer, who is also the client, who is also the sole beneficiary of the work, except that the beneficiary line on the related form is still blank, which means the sole beneficiary is, in the most technical sense, no one yet. He files the statement. Same cabinet, same folder. The folder is thick now. Years of quarterly timestamps in a process that began in his late 20s when an HR representative at his first real job explained the company. Match, and he signed up because the math was obvious. He didn't know then what the number would become. He planned for a category, sufficiency, and the category has been achieved. Sufficiency. That's the word his system returns every time he queries it. Not wealth, not abundance, sufficiency. The precise amount required, calculated against the precise requirements anticipated, with a margin for error that reflects his temperament, cautious but not fearful. He built this, piece by piece, year by year, through 3 recessions, 2 job changes, and 1 period in his early 40s where the market dropped far enough to make him reconsider his allocation, but not far enough to make him panic. He held. He rebalanced. He continued. The discipline was unremarkable to him, just what you do when you understand compound growth and have the patience to let it work. But discipline sustained over decades is not unremarkable. It requires a consistency of behavior that most people cannot maintain because most people have competing demands. Children need tuition. Spouses have preferences. Families generate expenses that are unpredictable and non-negotiable. The man with a family who reaches this milestone did so while navigating those demands. That is one kind of discipline. The man without a family did so without those demands, but also without their structure. No one was depending on the contribution. No one would have noticed if he'd reduced it. No one was counting on the discipline except the future version of himself, a version that, at 28, was entirely abstract. He was saving for a person he hadn't met yet. He has now met that person. They are the same. And the person at the table, holding evidence of 30 years of discipline, has no one to show it to. Not because he needs applause, because completion in any system implies a recipient. Something is completed for someone. A house is built for occupants. A bridge is built for traffic. A fund is built for what? For a future, his future. A future now arriving with the same quiet regularity as the statements themselves. But a future is not a person. A future is a time horizon. And a time horizon, however well funded, does not sit across the table. He makes lunch, a sandwich with good bread and better mustard, because he learned long ago that small upgrades in daily consumption produce more sustained satisfaction than occasional extravagance. He eats at the table. The statement is filed. The moment is past. Except it hasn't. The threshold is not just financial, it's structural. He has moved from accumulation to what? The planners call it distribution. But distribution implies direction. Something or someone that receives the output. Drawdown, then, the technical term. Converting the accumulated balance into lived expenses. Drawing down for whom? For himself. The groceries, the property taxes, the health insurance, the water heater replacement. Real expenses. The math works, but there's a surplus. There has always been a surplus because his expenses are moderate and his accumulation was consistent, and the system was optimized for a lifestyle that costs less than most assume. One person, one house, no dependents. The burn rate is low. The surplus will grow. As the account generates returns and drawdowns remain modest, the gap between what he has and what he needs will widen. This is the opposite of most people's experience. Most people worry about outliving their money. He will not outlive his money. His money will outlive him, and then it will go somewhere. To the name on the beneficiary form, if he writes one, to the state if he doesn't, the money will transfer. The accounts will close. The statements will stop arriving at the dining table. He knows this. He's thought about it. Not morbidly, practically. He has the will, the directive, the insurance. The legal architecture is complete. What remains incomplete is not the paperwork. What remains incomplete is the meaning. This is the part he doesn't examine often, because examining it requires a kind of attention His system is not designed to produce. His system is designed for action, assessment, and execution. It is not designed for the question underneath the financial milestone. What was all this for? The money was for security. Security has been achieved. The career was for income and identity, both produced. The house was for stability and comfort, both present. Every component served a function, and every function has been fulfilled. But functions are not purposes. A function is what a thing does. A purpose is what a thing is for. The retirement account functions as a store of value. Its purpose was to sustain a future. The future is here. The man in the future is the same man who built it. The building is done, and the thing that was built has no one to sustain but the builder. The building is done. The builder is still inside, and there is no door-marked exit, not because he's trapped, because the building and the builder are the same structure. He cannot step outside what he is to observe what he built, because what he built is the life he's standing in. The retirement account, the house, the competencies, the financial architecture, all of it is him. It is shaped like him. It fits him. It serves him. And when he steps back, when the system no longer has its operator, the thing that was built does not persist in any meaningful sense. The house will be sold. The accounts will be liquidated. The tools in the garage will be appraised and dispersed. The spice rack will be emptied by someone who doesn't know the difference between smoked paprika and sweet paprika and doesn't care. This is not tragedy. He would reject that word. It is not tragic that a man's life does not persist beyond him. It is ordinary, the natural outcome of a particular structural arrangement. Most people buffer against this through children, who carry forward some version of the life, or through institutions, endowments, foundations, named gifts, or through partnership, where the shared life creates a joint memory one person carries after the other is gone. He has none of these buffers. The life he built will disperse when he is no longer present to maintain it. The systems will wind down. The accounts will close. The house will belong to someone else who will repaint the walls and change the thermostat and never know about the 14 steps. This is not a crisis. It's a condition. He has, for the most part, accepted it. But on the afternoon when the retirement account crosses its threshold, the acceptance is tested. Not challenged, tested. The way a structure is tested by a load it was designed to bear, but has never actually borne. The acceptance holds. The structure does not crack, but the load is felt. He feels it as a kind of stillness. Not emotional stillness. He's always emotionally still, or presents that way. This is structural stillness. The stillness of a machine that has completed its cycle and is waiting for the next instruction. But the next instruction is just continue. Continue the same cycle. Draw down instead of accumulate. Maintain instead of build. Sustain instead of grow. Most people navigate the transition from building to sustaining with company. The retirement party. The conversations about what's next. The partner who says, "We should go to Portugal." The friend who says, "I'm retiring next year too." The social infrastructure that surrounds a life transition and gives it texture. His transition occurs inside the system, recorded by the system, acknowledged by the system. The quarterly statement is the only external document that marks the change. And the statement doesn't know what it means. He spends the afternoon in the garage, not working on anything specific, organizing. He reorganizes the tool wall, which doesn't need reorganizing, but the activity is satisfying the way all optimization is satisfying. Small improvements in a system that already works. He moves the socket set to a more accessible position, labels a drawer that was previously unlabeled, throws away a tube of adhesive that expired 2 years ago. Maintenance activities. A man tending his own infrastructure, useful, rational, entirely self-referential, improving a system for a user base of 1. The sun moves across the garage floor. He works steadily. No music, no podcast, just the sounds of metal and plastic and the occasional scrape of a drawer. When he's done, he stands in the doorway and looks at the garage, clean, organized, tools where they should be, floor swept. If someone walked in, a buyer, an appraiser, an estate liquidator, they would see a well-maintained space. They would not see the hours. They would not see the choices. They would not see the specific intelligence that determine where each thing belongs. They would see a garage. He closes the door. A completed system without transfer remains unfinished. Not in the sense that something is wrong. In the sense that completion implies a handoff that hasn't occurred. The work was done. The structure stands. And the structure serves the person who built it, and only the person who built it. And when that person is no longer present, the structure doesn't transfer. It liquidates. The difference between transfer and liquidation is the difference between continuation and conversion. Transfer means the thing persists in a new context. Liquidation means the thing is reduced to its components, and the components are reassigned. His house will not be inherited. It will be sold. His tools will not be passed down. They will be appraised. His financial accounts will not sustain a family. They will be distributed to a name on a form, a name that, as of today, he still hasn't written. He goes inside, makes dinner, something that takes an hour of preparation, because the preparation fills the hour and the hour needs filling. He cooks carefully. The meal is good. He knows it's good because he made it and because his palate, developed over years, produces reliable assessment. No one tastes it but him. No one comments on the seasoning. The feedback loop is closed. He is the cook and the critic and the diner. The plate is washed. The counter is wiped. The kitchen light goes off. Tomorrow will arrive. The system will engage. The coffee will be made. The counter will accumulate its envelopes, and he will process them, one by one, with the same steady attention he's brought to everything for as long as he can remember. What's next is tomorrow, and tomorrow is the same. Sunday morning. The house is still in a way that only a single-occupant house can be still on a Sunday. Not the stillness of people sleeping in, that has a held quality, like a breath being saved. This is the stillness of a space that never changed states. Saturday night and Sunday morning are the same volume, the same temperature, the same air, He makes coffee, stands at the counter. Outside, a neighbor he's never spoken to is mowing the lawn. The sound is distant and rhythmic and completely unrelated to anything happening inside this house. He opens his laptop. The property tax reassessment notice from last week. Assessed value has gone up. Financially, good news. Practically, a higher tax bill. He calculates the difference. Manageable. Everything is manageable. That's the defining characteristic of his financial life. Not abundance, but the fact that every variable falls within tolerance. He closes the laptop and does something he rarely does. He sits without a task, not meditating, not resting, just sitting. The way a man sits when the checklist is empty and the next item hasn't generated itself yet. Kitchen clean, garage organized, accounts reviewed, mail sorted. For the next several minutes, nothing requires his attention. Most people seek this: leisure, free time, the absence of obligation. For people whose lives interlock with other schedules, children, partners, coordinated weekends, an empty hour is a luxury, pursued, protected, savored. For him, it is the default. Not an hour, the structure. His life does not generate external demands. It generates internal ones: maintenance, management, optimization, but these are self-assigned and self-timed. No external force says, be here, do this, respond to that. Every obligation in his calendar was placed there by him. Every deadline is self-imposed. Every commitment is voluntary and revocable. This is freedom. He would call it that. And he would be correct. The absence of constraint. The ability to allocate time without negotiation. Total sovereignty of schedule. But freedom and direction are not synonyms. Freedom is the removal of barriers. Direction is the presence of trajectory. A man can be completely free and completely without trajectory at the same time. He has been free for a long time. Free in the way people describe enviously. Must be nice. No one to answer to. Without understanding what the freedom contains, when the dinner party ends and the free man drives home to a house where the only schedule is the one he wrote, and the only consequence of canceling everything is that nothing happens. Nothing happens. That's the output of total freedom in sufficient quantity. When no one expects you, no events are generated by expectation. When no one depends on you, no events are generated by dependency. The calendar remains open. The phone remains quiet. The freedom continues, producing more of itself. He gets up, needs to move. The body at 50-something demands movement the way it demands water. Not desire, maintenance. He changes into running shoes 3 times a week. Same route. 3.5 miles through a neighborhood he knows at a depth only a runner knows. Every sidewalk crack, every dog behind every fence, every house repainted, and everyone that hasn't been. He runs alone. Running groups exist, but they require coordination, and coordination requires a social investment he determined years ago was not worth the return. He runs at his own pace, on his own schedule, without adjusting to anyone's capacity. Today, the run is just the run. Footfalls and breathing and the gradually loosening tension and his hamstrings are on mile 2. No music, no podcast. Ambient sound, lawnmowers, a barking dog, a child's voice from somewhere he can't see. The child's voice is brief. A shout, then a laugh, then nothing. He doesn't react. He notices it. The way he notices the cracked sidewalk on Elm. Data from the environment. But the child's voice does something the sidewalk does not. It introduces a reference point. A reminder that the neighborhood contains lives organized around different architectures. Where Sunday morning is not quiet. Where the house is not still. Where the calendar is full of events generated by other people's needs. Soccer games, birthday parties, grocery runs calibrated for 4. He does not want that life. He wants to be clear about this, even if only to himself. He does not look at houses with bicycles in the driveway and feel longing. He feels recognition. A different structural choice produces a different set of outputs. Their outputs include noise, obligation, financial pressure, logistical complexity, and the constant negotiation of shared space. His outputs include silence, autonomy, financial surplus, logistical simplicity, and the uninterrupted ownership of his own time. Neither set is superior. They are different configurations. He finishes the run, stretches on the front porch, water, shower. The rest of Sunday opens in front of him like a field with no fence. He can do anything. He can do nothing. Both equally available and equally consequence-free. He chooses to do something. He always does, because the alternative creates a silence that is not restful but conspicuous. The man who has everything organized and nothing demanded of him discovers that free time, in sufficient quantity, stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like vacuum. Not painful, not traumatic, just empty in a way that activity prevents. So he stays active, reads, works on a shelf in the garage, building it for no particular reason other than the pleasure of building. Makes a proper dinner, something that takes an hour, because the preparation fills the hour. This is not desperation. He is managing a resource, time, that his system produces in surplus. The management requires strategy. Activity is the strategy. Competence is the fuel. The shelf gets built. The dinner gets made. The day passes. But the management reveals something. A system that must generate its own demand is a system without external purpose. Not without internal purpose. The shelf serves a function. The dinner nourishes. The run maintains health. But the reasons originate within the system and return to the system. In a life with dependence, demand is external. The child needs dinner. The partner needs conversation. The schedule requires coordination. The demand comes from outside and the system responds. The response gives direction. A vector that says, this needs to happen next, and someone other than you needs it to happen. He has no external vector. Every vector is self-generated, and self-generated vectors can be revised without consequence, postponed without impact, abandoned without anyone noticing. The shelf can wait. The dinner can be simpler. The run can be skipped. None of these revisions produce a ripple in anyone else's day. The absence of ripple is the absence of structural connection. The kind where a change in one system propagates to another, where his decision affects someone else's Tuesday, where his presence or absence is detected by people, not institutions. He has been ripple-free for a long time. His decisions propagate inward, not outward. The shelf is half done by evening. He'll finish it next weekend. He photographs it, not to share, but to reference measurements later. The photo goes into a folder with other project photos. No one will look at this folder. Operational documentation for a system of one. He eats dinner. The meal is good. He knows it's good. No one comments on the seasoning or the texture. The feedback loop is closed. The plate is washed, counter-wiped, kitchen light off. On the way to the bedroom, he passes the counter where the brokerage envelope has been sitting. It's been there long enough to become part of the landscape, an object present without being active. He picks it up, sits down at the dining table. Same chair. Reads the form again. Account number, balance, beneficiary designation. He writes his brother's name, not because it's the right answer, because it's an answer. The form requires a name, and his brother is the person whose name fits the space provided. A structural solution to a structural problem. The money will go to his brother. The legal process will be clean. He looks at the name on the line. It looks correct. It looks like what a completed form looks like. Name, account number, signature, date. The institution will process it. The file will be updated. He folds the form, places it in the return envelope, sets it by the door with outgoing mail. The act is administrative, less than 2 minutes. A decision that sat on the counter for weeks, resolved in the time it takes to write a name and seal an envelope. But the ease of the action has not matched the weight of the delay. The delay was not about difficulty. It was about what the form made visible. And now the form is completed, and the visibility has been managed, and the envelope is sealed, and the thing that was exposed has been covered with a name on a line. His brother will receive the money. His brother will not know what the money represents. Not the dollar amount, that's printed clearly, but the compressed time, the decades, the mornings and evenings and weekends, the discipline no one monitored, the decisions no one reviewed, the system that ran without witness for 30 years and produced this number, which will transfer cleanly, tax efficiently, to a man in another state who will receive it with gratitude and without understanding. That is not a criticism of his brother. His brother is a decent man. He'll handle the money responsibly, probably donate some, maybe set some aside for his own children. The niece and nephew seen once a year at Thanksgiving. The money will do what money does. Move from one account to another. Serve its next function. The transfer will be clean. But clean is not complete. Clean is the absence of complication. Complete is the presence of understanding. And understanding requires proximity, the kind that comes from shared days, not shared holidays. The kind that knows the 14 steps and the reason the pillow was chosen, and the satisfaction of a well-organized spice rack. That proximity does not exist. The form has been filled. The name has been written. The system has been updated. He sits at the table for another moment. 30 seconds. The house is quiet. The pen is on the table. The outgoing mail is by the door. He gets up, turns off the light. 14 steps. The system has processed the form. The beneficiary is designated. The architecture has been documented. The documentation is complete. The architecture is unchanged. A month passes, maybe 2. The envelope was mailed. The form was processed. A confirmation letter arrived. Single page, beneficiary designation updated. He filed it with the quarterly statements. Same cabinet. Same folder. The administrative matter is closed. Nothing changed. He expected nothing to change, and nothing did, and the accuracy of that expectation is itself a kind of data. The form was not a turning point, not a catalyst. It was a document that required a name, and a name was provided, and the system incorporated the update and continued operating as before. The coffee is made at the same time. The dishes are done before bed. The thermostat holds its number. The hallway is still 14 steps. The silence is still his. If this were a different kind of story, the kind told in therapists' offices or self-help chapters or Sunday morning interviews, this is where the shift would happen. The man would fill out the form and feel something crack open. He'd call his brother, join a group, adopt a dog, sign up for something. The form would be the inciting incident for a transformation arc that ends with a man at a larger table, surrounded by people, smiling in a way that signals resolution. That is not this. This is a man who filled out a form and mailed it and went to bed and woke up and made coffee and continued. Because the form was never the problem. The form was a symptom of a structure, and the structure was not altered by completing the paperwork. You can update a beneficiary designation without updating the architecture that made the designation difficult. The two processes operate on different layers. He knows this, not in these words, but operationally. The way he knows the P-trap needs a washer and the water heater should be replaced before it fails. Surface action and deeper system, not the same thing. And he is not interested in renovating the deeper system. He is not a man in need of repair. Not a man waiting to be fixed by the right circumstance, or the right person, or the right revelation. His system works, has worked for decades, will continue for the foreseeable future, which he has planned for with the same discipline he brings to everything. What he is, and this is the thing no form captures, and no financial plan addresses, and no medical questionnaire measures, is unobserved, not unknown. People know him, his brother, former co-workers, the hardware store man. The doctor has his chart. The attorney has his will. He exists in systems, filed, recorded, documented. His name appears in databases and tax records and property registries. By every institutional measure, accounted for. But accounted for is not observed. Accounting is a record of transactions. Observation is a record of presence. And presence, the kind that registers in another person's nervous system, the kind noticed not because of what it produces, but because of what it is, requires a witness close enough to see the ordinary, not the milestones. not the crises, the ordinary, the Tuesday evening, the Sunday morning, the way he holds a coffee mug, the sound he makes when he reads something that surprises him, the specific silence that means he's thinking versus the silence that means he's tired. These are textures perceptible only at close range. They cannot be reported. They cannot be filed. They exist only in the space between two people who share enough proximity for the small data to register. He does not have that proximity. The textures of his life exist unperceived. They happen. They are real. They are as present as the coffee and the 14 steps and the organized garage. But they land on no one's awareness except his own. This is not the same as not existing. He exists fully. The life is real, and it is his, and it operates with an integrity earned through decades of consistent attention. Nothing about his existence is diminished by the absence of a witness. A tree that falls in a forest makes a sound whether or not someone hears it. The physics don't change, but the record changes. Without a witness, the event is real and unremembered. It occurs and passes and leaves no trace in a second consciousness. On a Saturday in November, he does something outside his pattern. He drives to a lake about 40 minutes from his house. Not a vacation, not a trip, just a drive. He's been to this lake before, years ago, with a woman whose handwriting used to appear on his bathroom mirror. They'd come here on a Sunday afternoon, sat on a bench near the boat launch, watched nothing in particular. It was the kind of afternoon that has no purpose and no product and exists only in the shared experience of two people occupying the same bench at the same hour. He parks in the same lot, walks to the same area. The bench is still there, or a bench is there. He can't tell if it's the same one. It doesn't matter. He sits. The lake is doing what lakes do in November. Gray water, low sky. A few birds he can't identify moving across the surface in a pattern that probably means something to an ornithologist and means nothing to him. The air is cold, not biting, just present. He doesn't know why he drove here. That's not entirely true. He knows the reason at the structural level. The system has been running at steady state for long enough that a deviation was overdue. The way a machine needs to be taken offline occasionally, not because it's malfunctioning, but because continuous operation without variation produces its own kind of wear. He needed a different input. The lake is a different input. But underneath the structural reason, there's something else. Something he would not name if asked, and would not admit if named by someone else. He came here because this is one of the few places in his geography that contains a memory of being accompanied, not a romantic memory, not a nostalgic one, just the factual memory that he once sat here and there was another person next to him, and the afternoon existed in two nervous systems instead of one. He sits for about 20 minutes. The cold starts to get into his knees. He stands, walks back to the truck, drives home. The house is the same. The 14 steps. The thermostat. The counter, now bare, except for the coffee maker and the olive oil and the key bowl. Everything where it belongs. He makes dinner, eats, washes the plate, and in the evening Sitting in the chair with a book he's reading slowly because there's no urgency, he becomes aware of something, not a feeling exactly, a structural observation. Like noticing a vibration in an engine that's always been there, but that you only hear when the road gets very quiet. The observation is this: his system has reached a state that engineers call equilibrium. All forces balanced, all inputs matched by outputs. No acceleration, no deceleration. The system is not growing. It is not declining. It is maintaining. Equilibrium is, in engineering terms, the optimal state. It means the system has achieved stability. It means no corrective action is required. It means everything is working. It also means nothing is changing. And a system in equilibrium, unless acted upon by an external force, will remain in equilibrium indefinitely. This is not a prediction. It's a law. Newton's first law applied not to a body in motion, but to a life in stasis. An object at rest stays at rest unless something outside it intervenes. Nothing outside is intervening. Nothing outside is positioned to intervene. The brother texts on birthdays. The barber cuts his hair every 4 weeks. The doctor checks his blood work once a year. These are maintenance interactions. They do not introduce force. They do not alter trajectory. They confirm the existing state and move on. He is in equilibrium. And equilibrium, from inside, is indistinguishable from permanence. The book is open on his lap. He hasn't turned the page in several minutes. Not because the content is difficult, because his attention has shifted from the page to the room. The room is quiet. The lamp casts the same circle of light it always casts. The chair holds him the way it's held him for 12 years. Everything is exactly the same as it was yesterday, and the day before, and the week before, and the month before. This is comfort. He would call it that. The comfort of a system that delivers exactly what it promises, every day, without deviation. This is also stasis. He would not call it that, because stasis implies something is wrong, and nothing is wrong. Everything is functioning. The word he would use is stable, and he would be correct. It is stable. But stability and vitality are not synonyms. Stability is the absence of disruption. Vitality is the presence of change. A man can be completely stable and completely without vitality at the same time. The heart beats. The lungs fill. The system runs. But the running is repetition, not motion. It covers no new ground. It encounters no new resistance. It produces no new data. He reads a few more pages. The book is good. It holds his attention the way a well-made tool holds the hand, functionally, reliably, without surprise. He finishes the chapter, marks the page, sets the book on the shelf next to the chair. The shelf is exactly the right height. He measured it before installing it. Nobody questioned the measurement. It's the right height. He goes to the kitchen for water, passes the counter. The counter is clean. No envelopes, no forms, no institutional correspondence requiring a name he doesn't have. The counter is just a counter. Surface, material, function. His. He drinks the water standing at the sink, looking out the window above the basin. The backyard is dark. The motion sensor light didn't trigger, which means nothing is moving out there. The yard is maintained. He mows it himself, edges it, keeps the hedge trimmed to a height that satisfies the HOA without requiring a conversation with the HOA. The yard is another system, another closed loop. He maintains it. It presents well. No one uses it. There's a patio with 2 chairs. He bought 2 because one looked odd, not because he expected a second person to sit in the other one. The second chair has been occupied maybe 4 times in the years he's owned it. Once by a cable technician taking a break. Once by a neighbor retrieving a ball that had come over the fence. Twice by the woman who left the notes during the period when she was present. 2 chairs, one occupied, the other maintaining the appearance of a set. He turns off the kitchen light. The window goes dark. His reflection disappears from the glass. There is a word he encountered once in a book about architecture. Not building architecture, the other kind. The kind that describes how systems and lives are structured. The word was legibility. It means the degree to which a system can be read from the outside. A legible city is one where a stranger can navigate by sight. A legible building is one whose function is apparent from its form. A legible life is one whose shape is visible to others. His life is not legible, not because it's hidden, because it has no external facing surface that communicates its internal state. The house looks like any house. The man looks like any man. The car, the yard, the mailbox, all normal, all standard, all communicating nothing beyond adequacy. The richness, and there is richness, though he wouldn't use that word, is entirely interior. The satisfaction of the spice rack, the knowledge of the 14 steps, the memory of a bench by a lake, the discipline of 30 years compounding, the competence that keeps every system running. All of this is real, and all of it is inside, and none of it is legible from the street. A stranger walking past his house at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night would see a single light on in the front room. They would form no impression. They would walk past. The light would mean nothing to them. The light means everything to him. It is his lamp, in his chair, in his room, illuminating the page of his book and the small circle of a life that is full, genuinely full, and entirely self-contained. Full and self-contained. He turns off the lamp. The room goes dark. The house adjusts. The 14 steps. He lies in bed. The ceiling is the same ceiling. The mattress is the right firmness. The pillow is the right pillow. The alarm is set, but unnecessary. He thinks about the lake, not about her. About the bench. About the fact that he drove 40 minutes to sit on a bench for 20 minutes in November cold, because the bench contained the memory of being 2 instead of 1. He doesn't sentimentalize this. He observes it the way he observes everything as data, as a signal from a system that is otherwise remarkably quiet. The signal says, equilibrium is not enough. He hears the signal. He does not act on it. Not because he rejects it, because he has no mechanism for acting on it. His system is built for solving problems that have procedural solutions. Replace the washer. Rebalance the portfolio. File the form. These are problems with inputs and outputs and measurable results. The signal from the bench is not that kind of problem. It has no procedural solution. There is no form to fill, no part to replace, no allocation to adjust. The signal says something is absent, and the absence is not a malfunction. It is a feature of the design, and you cannot fix a feature. You can only redesign. He is not redesigning. He closes his eyes. The house is quiet. The neighborhood is quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a sound he can't identify. Mechanical, rhythmic, indifferent. It runs for a while. Then it stops. The silence fills back in. He sleeps. The system sleeps. Tomorrow it will resume, the way it always resumes, with coffee and routine, and the steady operation of a life that answers every question it was built to answer, and none of the ones it wasn't. He reviews the year the way he reviews a quarterly statement, not with sentiment, with assessment. What was accomplished? What was maintained? What requires attention going forward? The water heater was replaced. The pipe was repaired. The retirement account crossed its threshold. The beneficiary form was completed and mailed. The property tax was paid. The physical was attended. The blood work returned within range. The doctor said he was doing better than most. The shelf in the garage was finished, sanded, sealed, mounted, level. The tools are organized. The house is sound. By every measure his system can generate, the year was successful. He sits at the dining table on a morning in late December, not New Year's Eve, a few days before. The kind of morning that exists in the gap between Christmas and the calendar turn, when the world runs at reduced capacity and the usual rhythms are suspended. He doesn't celebrate Christmas in any formal sense. No tree, no gifts to exchange. His brother called on the 25th. A brief conversation, maybe 8 minutes. How are you? Good. How's the weather there? Cold. You coming for Thanksgiving next year? Probably. All right. Take care. You too. 8 minutes. Annual maintenance on a fraternal connection that requires no further service until the next scheduled interval. The coffee is hot. The house is quiet. He is looking at nothing in particular. The counter, the window, the backyard, where the 2 patio chairs sit under a thin layer of frost. The occupied one and the unoccupied one, both equally cold. A year has passed, and the architecture is the same. This is not a complaint. He needs to be precise about this, because precision is the only language his system trusts. The architecture is the same because the architecture works. It was not damaged by the year. It was not weakened. If anything, it was reinforced. The form filled, the account funded, the maintenance performed, the contingencies addressed. The structure is stronger than it was 12 months ago. More documented, more organized, more thoroughly prepared for every foreseeable scenario. He has done everything a man can do alone, and he has done it well. That sentence lands differently than it would have a year ago. Not heavier, not lighter, just differently. As if the same words, in the same order, now cast a slightly different shadow. He has done everything a man can do alone. A year ago, the emphasis fell on everything. Now it falls on alone. He notices the shift. He doesn't investigate it. The shift is not actionable. It's observational. A change in the way light hits a surface that hasn't moved. He washes the mug, places it on the drying rack. The rack holds one mug, one plate, one glass, one fork, one knife. The proportions of a single-occupant system, visible in ceramic and steel. There's something he's been carrying since the lake, since the bench in November. It's not a feeling. He would resist that word. It's closer to an awareness. A persistent, low-level awareness that sits beneath the daily operations like a frequency just below audible range. You don't hear it. But if someone turned off every other sound in the room, it would be there. The awareness is this. His system is complete, and his system is invisible, and these two facts are not in conflict. They are the same fact, expressed on different channels. The completeness produces the invisibility. A system that needs nothing from the outside sends no signal to the outside, and a system that sends no signal cannot be perceived by anyone who isn't already inside it. He is the only one inside it. This has been true for years, decades, depending on how you measure. But the awareness of it, not the knowledge. He's always had the knowledge. The awareness has shifted from background to something closer to the surface, not intrusive, not disruptive, just present in a way that it wasn't before the beneficiary form sat on his counter for 3 weeks, waiting for a name that didn't exist. He thinks about Greg Tanaka sometimes, not often, maybe once a month, not about Greg's death, about Greg's infrastructure, the wife who knew where the documents were, the sons who flew in the same night, the office that sent flowers, the collection in Greg's name, the network that activated within hours because the network was already in place, had always been in place, was the natural byproduct of a life structured around connection rather than efficiency. He does not envy Greg's life. He needs to be clear about this. Greg's life included decades of compromise, negotiation, financial obligation, schedule coordination, and the low-grade friction that comes from sharing space with people whose needs don't always align with your own. Greg's life was loud where his is quiet, full where his is spare, populated where his is sovereign. He chose sovereignty, or arrived at it. The distinction has stopped mattering. What he did not choose, what no one chooses because no one sees it coming, is the way sovereignty compounds over time. The way each year of successful solo operation makes the next year more likely to be solo. The way competence itself becomes the barrier. Why would you introduce a variable into a system that runs clean? Why would you add friction to a machine that operates without it? The logic is impeccable. The logic is also the lock. He is locked inside his own competence. Not trapped, locked. The difference is that a trapped man wants out. A locked man may not. The lock is not a prison. It's a door that closed gradually through the accumulated weight of years in which the door was simply never used. The hinges didn't rust. The mechanism didn't fail. The door just settled into its frame, the way all doors settle over time. And now opening, it would require a force he has no reason to apply. And so he stands on one side of it. His side, The side with the coffee maker and the organized garage and the funded retirement account and the clean counter and the 14 steps and the silence that is his. Everything he needs is on this side. Everything he built is on this side. The other side is not empty. He knows this. The other side contains people, noise, complication, the barking dog and the child's laugh and the neighbor's lawnmower and the second chair being occupied by someone who would change the thermostat and leave notes in blue, ink, and ask questions about the water heater and introduce friction into every smooth-running system he's spent 30 years perfecting. The other side contains risk, and he has spent his entire adult life managing risk, mitigating it, hedging against it, building structures that minimize exposure. His portfolio is diversified. His insurance is current. His will is filed. His emergency contact is listed. Every risk he can identify has been addressed, except one: the risk of remaining unseen. He would not phrase it this way. He would not phrase it at all, because phrasing it would require the kind of self-examination that his system does not naturally produce. His system produces action, solutions, maintenance schedules and allocation tables, and beneficiary designations. It does not produce the sentence, "I have optimized my life to the point where my life is invisible," but the sentence is accurate. And accuracy is the thing he values most. A life can be intact and unseen. A system can be sound and unobserved. A man can be competent and unwitnessed. These are not contradictions. They are the structural consequences of an architecture that was built for performance and achieved it. The performance is real. The achievement is real. The stability, the competence, the discipline, the accumulation, the maintenance, all real, all present, all functioning exactly as designed. The design did not include a window, not a flaw, a feature. Windows let in light. They also let in weather. They compromise insulation. They require maintenance. They are points of vulnerability in an otherwise solid structure. He built the solid structure. He maintained it. He lives inside it. The light outside continues whether he sees it or not. The house holds its temperature through the night. The yard is trimmed. The chairs are frosted. The street is quiet. The neighbors' lights go off one by one. And somewhere in one of those houses, a child has been put to bed, and somewhere in another, a couple is talking about tomorrow, and somewhere in a third, a man is alone, like him, or maybe not like him at all, because the interior of every house is illegible from the street, and the only person who knows what a life contains is the person living it, or the people living it with them. He goes to bed. The ceiling is the same ceiling. The mattress is right. The pillow is right. The alarm is set, but unnecessary. He sleeps the way the house sleeps, quietly, completely, without interruption and without witness. The system powers down, and the powering down is identical to every other powering down, and the morning will be identical to every other morning, and the coffee will be made, and the routine will execute, and the structure will hold. It will hold because he built it to hold, and it holds. In the morning, he wakes before the alarm. He makes the coffee. He stands at the counter. He looks at the counter. Clean, bare, no envelopes waiting. The administrative backlog is clear. The systems are current. There is nothing pending. He drinks the coffee, washes the mug, places it on the rack, puts on shoes. He opens the front door to get the mail. The air is cold, January cold, the kind that occupies space that you step into rather than through. The mailbox is at the curb, 30 feet from the door. He can see it from where he stands. No flag up, probably nothing inside. But the walk is the walk, and the walk is part of the routine, and the routine is the structure, and the structure is the life. He stands in the doorway. Inside, the house is 68 degrees and silent, and his. Outside, the street is bright in a way that early January mornings are bright, thin, pale, uncommitted light that hasn't decided whether to warm anything. For a moment, less than a moment, a fraction of a second that would not register on any instrument designed to measure human hesitation, he stands at the threshold, not deciding, not deliberating, just present, in the space between inside and outside, between the system he built and the world that doesn't know he built it, between the architecture and the air. The moment passes. He steps out, walks to the mailbox, opens it, empty. He closes it, turns back toward the house. The door is open behind him. The warm air meets the cold. For 30 feet, he walks toward the house, and the house waits for him the way it always waits, patiently, completely, without expectation beyond his return. He steps inside, closes the door. The system continues.